students. On behalf of the organizers of this conference, I extend a warm welcome to all of you, especially to those who spared no effort to join us from overseas and prepare their papers in advance. I would also like to thank the organizing committee, namely Ms. Hayami. Where is she? Outside? Please stand up, please. Really, we have so much to do. Hello, madam. Is your madam here? Yeah. Probably all of them from email contact. Jessica Sugimoto and Mr. Saika. Yeah. And Mr. Ido from Manga Museum. He's not here today? Okay, we will meet him later. Thank you so much for the hard work. It was not easy to coordinate this conference, which is taking place at 2 different venues. The intention of this talk is to sketch out the central issues underlying our conference. My background is in aesthetics, art theory, and from this perspective I have been involved in Japanese manga studies for almost 20 years now. So please forgive me if my talk is a little biased. It's just my perspective. As the title indicates, we are supposed to address 3 fields of study related to manga, subculture, and Japan, respectively. In part, this topical orientation is due to the JSPS subsidy, or to be precise, this research grant is categorized as Nihon Kenkyu Jigyo, Japanese studies research, and topically dedicated to Japanese subculture, Nihon subculture. While it can be presumed that the funding authority had the singular in mind, our research project actually used the plural, subcultures. And starting with the application process, the collaboration of the Kobe University team with the International Manga Research Center of Kyoto Seika University proved to be crucial. Since 2009, this center, which is also the conceptual carrier of the International Manga Museum in Kyoto, this center has been holding annual scholarly conferences. This is my work, somehow. Manga Worlds is our 4th conference. In 2009, we had a conference in Kyoto, 2010 in Cologne, and last year in Korea, in Puchong. Hereafter, I shall outline our understanding, the Kyoto Seika University side's understanding of manga, before touching briefly upon notions of subculture, which may be relevant to our discussion in the coming days. So, together with Seika's graduate school for manga studies, the center is one of the few sites worldwide which focuses specifically on manga. That is to say, we do not use manga as a mere source or label. Rather, we pursue manga's distinctiveness by asking why manga. This includes, for example, the following issues. Why did precisely manga magazines give rise to fan communities which anticipated the virtual communities of the information age? Why has the genre of boys' love, or yaoi, taken its departure from manga, as distinct from the US, where we have been seeing slash literature? Why is manga more prone to exoticizing or being exoticized and being nationalized than anime or games? Just one guess, maybe anime's global production mode is strong enough to put references to animism, Shinto, and yokai spirits discursively in their place. And as we at Seika combine the perspectives of practitioners and scholars, we also wonder why non-Japanese young people still want to come to Japan to study the basics of manga, although the creative industry in Korea or the US are digitally much more advanced. while the Japanese publishing sector continues to follow more or less a business model which dates back to the 1960s. So as indicated by this short list, our special focus on manga does not privilege an already anachronistic autonomy of this expressive form in general, or single texts and creators in particular. Rather, we understand manga, firstly, as a medium, from the angle of practices which intertwine artists, mediators, and readers. Secondly, these practices and their institutional frameworks, including magazine-based genres, affect the actual shape of texts to such an extent that textual analysis cannot be separated from so-called context analysis anymore. In other words, manga as we know it today calls for analyzing what certain texts do or how they perform, rather than what they mean in a hermeneutical or representation-centered sense. Third, with respect to representation, we acknowledge that manga texts cannot be confined to reading material and, as such, be subjected to semiotics or studies of literacy alone. They are also material artifacts, which lend themselves to more applications than reading. And the different levels of meaning or reading haven't sufficiently been examined yet. Fourth, last but not least, manga studies regards manga as embedded in transmedia and transcultural flows, which get specified locally, but not necessarily nationally. And this applies not only to recent globalization, but to the fundamental properties of manga as such. In short, at Kyoto Seika University, we are interested in manga with all its facets, stretching from single texts to genres and publication sites, to readers and users, including both local particularities and global commonalities, and we try to consider different levels of social communication within the same country. From exchange between kindred spirits, for example within fan cultures, to exchange across genders, generations, and classes within society at large. From such an angle of manga studies, it is very difficult to conceive manga as subculture. That is, as a subcategory within an all-embracing supraculture. Likewise problematic is the preference for studying subcultures. I know, otaku, I know the subculture comes up, but let me put it this way. After all, otaku or fujoshi may relate their activities to manga, but to what degree this relation is a necessary one remains to be verified. And finally, manga as Japanese culture, defined in national terms, is not at the center of manga studies either, but we know very well that we find our most dedicated scholarly partners abroad in departments of Japanese studies. And many of these partners are here today. Welcome. But whoever favors manga in its distinctiveness remains lonely, plows a lonely furrow. Our unique selling point is not really advantageous, neither in the popular nor the academic markets. We just need to recollect the publications of recent years. The majority is dedicated to so-called subcultural practices, globalization, and media mix, mostly using ethnography as the main tool. So, as a consequence for me, I know I or you better obscure that manga is to occupy center stage when you intend to organize a scholarly event on manga studies. It's really in order to get colleagues from different fields to contribute and to attract a significant number of audience participants, You may want to choose a topical approach related to doujinshi or subculture, or to women's manga, or to the wartime past, or to an allegedly ahistorical Japanese tradition. Mentioned in passing, comic studies in North America face a similar problem. Apparently, comics are not ascribed the same cultural or social relevance as cinema, including anime as moving images, or literature, not even in Japan. Here, manga attracts the interest of public and research funding authorities less as a component of civic society, but rather corporate society. And it was interesting for me to hear the Einsatz from your vice president, who somewhat naturally assumes that this subject, manga world subculture, is linked to content industries. This is very symptomatic of our situation in Japan, I think. First example, Japanese universities, more than a dozen so far, have established their manga-related departments, mainly for economic reasons. All of them private universities, by the way. Second example, in October 2011, the responsibility for the Kyoto International Manga Museum changed from the Board of Education to the Bureau of Industry Promotion. Third example, and I don't have a slide, when Professor Yui, Professor Maekawa, and myself defended our research proposal at a JSP hearing in July 2010, remember? We were urged to include the METI, the Ministry of Economy, Trade, and so on, into our consideration, and hence the respective talks in this conference. In other words, in order to receive Japanese research grants, it is vital to link manga to economic purposes and or national culture. But the latter, I have nothing against national culture, especially now, but the latter is mainly constrained to branding. Like companies which spend enormous sums on advertising instead of improving the utility value of their products, the corporate society of post-Fukushima Japan expects Japanese subculture, including manga and manga studies, to participate in the promotion of Genki na Nippon, high-spirited, vital, energetic Japan. And so far, I haven't seen much discussions among scholars in Japan about alternatives. That is to say, the potential contribution of manga and manga studies to the strengthening of civic society in Japan. This, of course, does not only apply to manga studies. Which brings me back to the title of our conference, the word manga worlds, which is meant in a twofold way. Literally, it points to the imaginary, non-realistic, performative, fictional worlds which depart from manga and anime and are extended by fans and casual consumers with the aid of media corporations. And figuratively, it stands for the basically manga-esque constitution of contemporary culture, which is not manga-specific in the strict sense. Elsewhere, for example in Australia, a similar phenomenon would be labeled gamification. But gamification is not used in regard to Japan. Although the core meaning of this term applies equally, if not historically even longer, to Japanese media consumer culture. That is to say, for example, engaging users and comforting them by simplification and repeatable techniques, following rules, turning things into sensuous fun, affirming commercialism, etc. Against the background of what kind of manga is actually globalizing